Is there a process?
I think they're setting down like.
No, that guy just took that one of the block thing, put it there, and he just went, and I don't know what.
Oh yeah, this is a friend of mine, Alex.
How's it going? Yeah, I'm her ride. Sticking around.
We can try to find somewhere quieter.
Yes.
Do you have a suggestion on what?
We could go closer to the Sentinel's offices, or just the floor up.
Or where
This way. The nerd sec. Oh, you mean where
That's what we called it because we always went and played Magic, and there's always people.
Oh, you play Magic? Awesome. Yeah, I also played Magic for a bit before I ended up realizing I wanted to use my money for something else. But
yeah, it takes an investment.
it's a good hobby. I mean,
You guys know how much Nathan made from the Magic cards? Too much.
It's way too much money.
Yeah, no.
there's no such thing as too much.
That was back when like he was like upset. That was when Magic was in section for 2 weeks.
Right.
And he knew it was like, I don't want your Magic cards. You want to buy mine?
No, I ended up. I mean, I loved it, but it was just like I couldn't keep up with it.
It's not something that I would take professional.
Right. Oh, I couldn't do competitive.
This is a nice little room over there.
Yeah, it is. I think they got 75,000 from Sayback to do this.
Wow, that's a lot for this. That seems kind of unnecessary.
Well, I saw Bernard. He was in Sayback, and he made the request for this.
I mean, like, it's cool, but
Yeah, this is gorgeous. Okay, so if we're gonna do an interview, I'd like to record it, if that's all right.
fine. I do the same, so you're fine.
All right.
It's actually just us talking.
I'm the only one not recording, but I'm using my mind.
Okay. All right. So yeah.
I'm just gonna listen.
So the main thing is there've just been like, I guess, some concerns raised and everything, some misconceptions about the group of Voice for Men, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, is it backing KSU Men or how?
It's a sponsor.
It's a sponsor? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I looked in the KSU...
And the other connection is I'm the collegiate activism director, so
Okay.
I work there.
Okay.
However, KSM is not a formal subsidiary.
Okay.
We are independent organizations.
So they're just like a sponsor and everything,
Yeah.
and you're independent. So the main thing is I looked on the website for KSU Men, and it doesn't have a whole... I was trying to find like a mission statement. I saw where you guys have individual missions. I was looking for like a mission statement kind of thing. But
Yeah, the closest thing you'd find would be the KSM Constitution, which has a mission statement, a purpose statement.
Okay, I can try to find that then.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell Anne-Marie Thomas to let you see a copy.
Okay, so what would you say is like the main, I guess, mission if you could sum it up into like a sentence?
What I've been telling everybody, even at all the Ignition tailgates, is pretty much the same thing. We're a community of men and women that talks about issues affecting men and boys and advocates solutions for issues affecting male students on campus.
Okay, and I know some of your missions were like you were concerned with renaming the Women Resource and Interpersonal Violence Prevention Center. What would you recommend renaming that to?
Just Interpersonal Violence Prevention Center.
Taking out the Women's Resource?
Well, basically what we want to do is I found out through a conversation with Shamika Wilson, she's the director, that they offer services to both men and women in the Interpersonal Violence Prevention Center. So the problem is that basically they had a unisex restroom, but they taped the women's sign over to a unisex sign. So guys don't even realize that the services are available to them. And one of the former officers of the non-normative anti-assimilationist students at KSU had said, well, we know of male domestic violence victims on campus. They don't even realize they have a place to go. And so the idea is to have a gender-neutral name for that center so that men and women both understand that there's a place for them. But when I went up and talked to Dr. Maddox about it, and you can read all this. This has all been published. I talked to Dr. Maddox about it, and he had two arguments there. One, these were traditionally called women's centers. I'm connected with Erin Pitsey. She's the person who founded the first domestic violence shelter for women in London, or probably first domestic violence shelter for women ever, right? And she's the tradition setter. And she said, I don't know what he's talking about. So I told Dr. Maddox that, and he said, the IPV Center also has an aggregate women's resource center. And I said, well, what are you guys doing there? And they said, well, we help women talk about, I think it was Shamika who told me this. We talk to women who want to figure out how to handle a career and a kid at home or something of that nature. And I said, well, we could call that a family resource center, couldn't we? I mean, I still don't understand the gender dimension to this. It doesn't need to have that much of a gender dimension. And if we really had to have a women's resource center, that's great, but I don't see an aggregate men's resource center. Doesn't Title IX obligate you to have equivalent centers? And they said, well, yeah, maybe. So that's kind of where we left it. And Dr. Maddox said, well, we could have a men's resource center to complement the women's resource center in late 2015 when we have new buildings up, right? Mm-hmm. And then at that point, we can move the women's resource center out to its own function, like it could have its own space, and the IPV center would be its own unique, isolated function. And that would be great if we had a men's center, a women's center, and an IPV center. Mm-hmm. Then it'd be gender neutral. But right now, it's currently a gender neutral service branded in a woman-centric way. And that it's not servicing the entire community in a very equitable fashion. That's our position.
Okay, and then I also saw that you were interested in the gender studies, what is this, the Gender and Women's Studies program?
What we want to do is we want to diversify the literature. We just add on, we have, I looked at the reading list, and I published the reading list that I got from the bookstore for spring and summer last year, I think it was. Can't remember what semesters. But in essence, there's coverage for LGBT, the black community, and women. But there's no coverage necessarily for masculinity, at least not in a way that's really sensitive to the male experience. There's often a narrative that vilifies men, or another way defines them in an oppression narrative. That is to say, men are the oppressors. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to show that, well, this is a very one-sided way of looking at things. There's also the average guy who just works at a construction site, risks his life and limb, and for a paycheck in order to either feed his family, support a child, the single fathers that are out there, or just in some way show that there is another side of the story that the school just doesn't teach at all. And it is from scholarly fashion as well. I mean, we've the books I've been taking to the professors has been Paul Nathanson and Catherine Young's trilogy on misandry. That is spreading misandry, legalizing misandry, and sanctifying misandry. But I think there was another one. I think sanctifying misandry, it was actually a fourth that they released. But this is, and these books go very in depth into the kinds of issues that we talk about, and they'd be an excellent addition to curriculum. So that would be something we'd want to introduce to gender and women's studies. When if talking about renaming things, I'd say go ahead and call it gender studies. It's again that branding thing doesn't need to be as centric on one gender. If we called it gender and men's studies, that would cause an outrage. So it's just a matter of let's just call it something neutral.
Gender and women's studies sounds a bit redundant anyway, just a little bit. And then the last thing I know, I actually saw on your website where you were posting about the Rad for Men program, and I had seen where you had gone and they ended up canceling because there wasn't enough people, and you had read through, I guess, some of their literature and everything.
I forgot to bring the manual today. I was actually planning on bringing it. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine. But I did see where I guess, they talked about how it was actually more geared to help women. And
it was actually by the founders' admission that they were doing that.
And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about that and what, I guess, what you would rather it be then.
Sure. I had this conversation with Miss Allday earlier. Basically, Rape Aggression Defense for Men was founded by a guy named Lawrence Nadeau. Well, RAD Systems, the entire program. And RAD Systems is a international network for self-defense that sells its program to both universities in Canada and the United States. And RAD Systems offers different programs to different demographics. They got a RAD Seniors, RAD for Kids, RAD for Women, and RAD for Men. Now, they also have an endorsement of the White Ribbon Campaign. Don't know how deep that relationship is, but the idea is they wanted to offer self-defense options for women, and this was something that Lawrence had stated in his founding documents and in his greeting letters. Now, when it came to KSU, this is under Trudy Vaughn, the Georgia RAD director, and she's also here on campus as a police trainer. And RAD for Women was founded in 2002. Okay, this was basic RAD, and they ended up offering that for over a while. Now, this was not on a need base. From 1995 to 2002, the FBI UCR crime reports show that there was only one reported rape on campus, and we're not too sure if it led to a conviction, nor do we know the sex of the victim. So the 1995 is when KSU got university status. 2002 would be where RAD for Women was founded. So just that one report was still It couldn't have been a need-based thing to found this program, that's what I'm saying, because there wasn't many rapes that were reported. So Kathy Alday was telling me, well, it was probably because housing came to be, right? So security had to reevaluate the way it was doing a lot of its programs. And that made sense. I still don't know how deep that connection goes. But now we go fast forward 10 years to 2012. That's when Rad for Men came on campus. And the Sentinel did a report on that. And Trudy Vaughn made some statements in that article. And she said something along, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of, we teach you your responsibilities as a man. That caught my attention. I'm thinking, what responsibilities? Now, I ended up contacting security starting in January, asking them, well, what does this mean exactly? And February 5th, I finally ended up getting Trudy Vaughn's card. And I sent her questions, very basic questions about the course, such as how does Rad for Men differ from Rad for Women? Something like that. I also had questions about the promotion of the course. They sent out promo emails saying that we simulate attacks with the Rad Man. And I looked at the pictures they have of KSU staff. There's both women and men in these aggressor suits, but they're called the man anyway. Why? It's sexualizing the aggressor only to men, even though rape can happen by anybody to anybody. So so these are the kind of things that made me just want to investigate the course further. Trudy Vaughn either did not answer my questions or gave me good answers to the wrong questions, or flat out copied and pasted material I already saw. This ended up going for several unproductive months, until finally I had to get other staff members to kind of weigh in and help me get answers from her. And eventually she turned it into a copyright thing. She said, well, I can't really tell you any of the answers to these questions because that would mean I'd have to copy material from the manual, which is bogus. It can be paraphrased, and it doesn't even have to come from the manual. It could just be straight up answers from experience. I was not asking anything difficult. But at that point, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I would like to see these manuals. So I filed an open records request with the legal division. And they ended up saying, okay, we'll let you take a look at the manuals. And I did, and I have a really awful phone. That didn't even last very long, but I took some photos of the material. And the phone battery died, so I couldn't get much. And then the legal division said, well, you know what? We might be seen as distributors of these manuals by letting you look at them if you're going to take photos. So we're not going to let you look at them again. If you want to get a copy of the Rad for Men manual, you have to take the course. And Trudy Vaughn told me that during the summer. But the issue was that no Rad for Men course was scheduled during that time. Actually, I'm sorry, this must have been spring when she told me this, I'm sorry. But when so I was just thinking to myself, well, if I can't even take the course, I had to see the manuals anyway. That's what kind of got me to see those original manuals in the legal division. So come this semester, we finally managed to get into Rad for Men. Got to see the manual, got to listen to the teachers and all that. The teachers were great people. Had no problem with them. They're very professional in their approach. They did tell me that they can't teach anything except what Rad gives them, so the manual kind of becomes representative of everything that I took issue with, and of which there are several things. The first and most major issue is that it's not really a self-defense course. That is the most pragmatic issue that goes beyond any sort of emotional or opinionated perspective I can put on it. There explicitly makes recommendations toward the men that are addressed through this manual, that they are responsible for stopping sexual assault when it happens. And it says so explicitly, stop sexual assault. This is also indicative in the White Ribbon Campaign connection I told you about. This is very dangerous. This is cops telling young men, go out, and if you see a crime, put yourself at risk to stop it. Instead of doing something more sensible, like avoid the conflict, but call 911, state what you saw, make sure that it's handled, readily and professionally. But if you put yourself at risk, this is not self-defense. That could be flat out reckless. And through my work at A Voice for Men, I've also heard stories of guys who would end up intervening in, say, a sexual assault, and the victim, who is at that point probably hysterical, right, turns and sees the helper as an accomplice and accuses that person of assault as well, and it ends up becoming a real mess. And I actually went up to Ohio and Maine to speak on these subjects as well. So overall, Rad for Men is telling men very harmful messages that could put them at risk. And in that front letter of the manual, Lawrence Nadeau does say explicitly that this program only exists for our destiny-driven programming for women. He says those words, destiny-driven programming for women. And this course really only exists because the OCR made a stance that there has to be an equivalent service. Like, it's just a head nod to, yes, we have to be equitable. So it's one of those things where Rad for Men does not have a practice that is indicative of really investing in the safety of male students. It's rather trying to hold them responsible for things that could put them in great danger. So our goal at KSU Men is to try to convince KSU administrators to invest in a different self-defense network, one that is not vilifying men. And there's even a misogynistic message to this as well that says to women, well, women, you need a man to protect you. That's by holding men responsible, they're assigning men the guardian protector role. Well, women are assumed to be not able to protect themselves, which is what Rad for Women would do, offer women those self-defense options. Mm-hmm. So for women, it's self-defense. For men, it's her defense. And men are left vulnerable as a result. We want a new system.
All right, so here's a question. I think I saw where you had talked about in your article or blog, whichever, that, they talked about that it was your responsibility, as in, like, men needed to control themselves kind of thing.
Right, that was also in the book. Now, this was more of a... Now, there was some areas where it was more of what I was reading out of it. I wanted to tell you first about that self-defense issue, because that's pragmatically what's wrong with it at its core, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to this, that language, yes, that was also a problem, where in essence they were telling men that you are by default unable to control your emotions. It would say things like, stop being angry, stop telling sexist jokes. Are you expressing the qualities of a dangerous man? Do you have a fascination with weapons? All these things you could find in that manual. Mm-hmm. And it's in essence communicating with men in such a way that it's boxing men in to a false binary, where you are either a dangerous man who expresses certain qualities that are frankly the opinion of whoever wrote that manual, I would say. Some opinions would be sensible, but are not necessarily indicative of a dangerous man, but of a dangerous person. Mm. And they would, there's a lot of that vilification toward men in that manual. And the way that they're casting men and the way they're communicating to men shows again that this is not a defense network that is really interested in the welfare of man. It's more interested in assigning them a particular role to live by.
Okay, so what is your idea of a new system? Do you guys have a suggestion to come forward with?
It's just a very sensible return to something gender neutral that doesn't make gender so as salient. And to give you an example, right now we're in the process of finding a new self-defense course, whether it be just go to a local martial arts studio, see if they offer programs of that nature, tell them about what's happening with RAD, and see if they're willing to just offer a self-defense course that does not have that same vilification narrative, mm-hmm. and does not in any way try to assign gender roles that are against the liberty of the people who are in the course. And with this, there are some gender variables that do make sense, that could very well be helpful to men and women when taught appropriately, but there's a very thin line there, and it needs to be tread carefully. And one example I can give you is when I was in Rad for Men, I ended up asking one of the cops there, well, what is the difference between Rad for Men and Rad for Women? And he said, well, our studies have found that women tend to be grappled more, while men tend to be hit more, so our defense techniques are tailored to that finding. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. I didn't know what those numbers were. He didn't tell me what they were. Mm-hmm. But that sounded a lot more plausible than just suggesting that only men are dangerous and need to go out and protect everybody else except themselves.
Okay, so would you be open to, just to kind of get an idea, like if they took out the Rad for Men program, and if the rape aggression defense wasn't for women, if it was just a rape aggression defense course that didn't have that narrative that did vilify men, as you say, and it was more of just say, here's how to defend against rape, self-defense kind of thing, and anybody can sign up or whatever, but it is tailored towards defending against someone, an attempted rapist, would you be open to that if it just didn't have those gender names or gender roles or gender narrative at all?
I would say that just the removal of the gender roles is appropriate, and the unnecessarily biased gender narrative. But it's fine if there are programs tailored to different genders. I mean, we have that already, right? Mm-hmm. KSU Men is specialized in men. and Kennesaw Women in Mathematics specialized in women, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with specializing in a demographic. The problems start when you start to tell people what to do with their lives in a way that's dangerous to them, that infringes on their liberty, that infringes on their capacity to really live their own lives. And if we were to, if Rad for Men was in any way, if Rad for Men was in any way a program that was actually specializing in facts about men, without those editorial opinions that's coloring the way that those facts are interpreted, then I wouldn't have as much of an issue with it. And so it's the issue is not necessarily that there's a Rad for women and a Rad for men. If both of those are there and they're making for a better campus community, then that's great. I would say what needs to be done is we need to have look at a new provider instead of Rad Systems, which is the company. Do just a different, contract it out to a different, either a local martial arts studio, help the local community, or find a self-defense expert and get his consultation or her consultation, right? That's what we would like to say.
Okay, so then gearing a little bit away from the specific missions and everything.
Yeah, you have the Voice for Men stuff?
Well, that as well. I do know that your group is getting a lot of backlash. Just one, because of what it is, men's issues and everything. I know that there's been backlash from women and from men. And then we'll go to the branching off to the Voice for Men thing, because that's also something that people are a bit concerned about.
Sure.
So, like I said, I've seen the backlash that has come even from men, and there's
I've seen it too.
Then there's a concern that, that there isn't a need for a men's issue group.
You should see the lovely emails I get.
I did see some that you actually had, I think, on your blog. So I saw some of them. But so there are things even from men saying that it's unnecessary. And so what can you say to not just the women, because women believe like this group doesn't want that group to have something or whatever, but what would you say to the men who have a problem with this?
I would say that we can't speak for anybody but ourselves. We're not going to claim to speak for all men. That's not going to be one of the. I just don't think that would be respectful to those men. I will say, if they're in a position where they don't feel that KSU Men is necessary for them, I'm very happy. I hope we're not. In fact, I would say that if we're in a position, if I'm totally wrong about everything, about that fact that if I were wrong about men having issues, that would be good news to me. That's a great thing to be wrong about. But the research that I have done shows that men are committing suicide, especially in this age bracket, at higher and higher rates, 4 times more than women in the college age group. And the graduation rate for men has been taking a nosedive. The dropout rate's been increasing in tandem. The men are also subject to violations of due process, especially with a Dear Colleague letter from the Department of Education, which changes the standard of evidence to I think it was a preponderance as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt or something along those lines. So in essence, it's and the Dear Colleague letter also opened up men to double jeopardy and other violations of basic human rights. And so the conclusion that I've drawn from this is that even though that some of the men on this campus who may say KSU Men is unnecessary, they may very well have wonderful lives, and I'm very happy for them. But there is a corrosion of the system that can very much put them at risk one day, and I don't want them to be in that position where they ended up getting really seriously hurt before they learned that maybe they would want a representation on campus somewhere. So again, I'm very happy to hear that they don't find KSU Men necessary. I wouldn't want to be necessary. I wouldn't want KSU Men to be necessary. But the truth of the matter is that we are in a culture and in a bureaucratic environment that puts men at risk, and there needs to be something to help them in case something goes really seriously wrong.
Okay, so going on to the A Voice for Men things. I know I looked on that site and saw a lot of their mission statements and whatnot. And like I said, there's a lot of concern because A Voice for Men is listed as a hate group on the Southern Poverty Law Center.
It's not listed as a hate group.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and tell you what happened here. Author Goldwag, who is an author who was hired by the SBLC to examine different sites that were alleged to have misogyny, he ended up lumping A Voice for Men under the manosphere. And the manosphere is a loose term that groups together blogs, editorials, and all sorts of things that in some way is interested in men. Okay. Now you could find, I will go ahead and state for the record, that you will find under the manosphere misogyny. There's just no secret about that. Just like you can find radicals under the feminist movement or the women's movement that are misandrist. They're hateful of men. There's always going to be that element somewhere. But A Voice for Men was unfairly cast that way because just by author Goldwag's sole determination and on an editorial context, it was an opinion piece. Mm-hmm. Under a blog post called Misogyny, the Sites on the SPLC. Now, people saw this, and they saw it under the SPLC header and thought, oh, shoot, the SPLC has declared A Voice for Men as a hate group, and they ran with that. Now, if you look at the SPLC's official hate map in all of their official publications, their intelligence reports and things of that nature, you will not find A Voice for Men on it.
Okay.
What people saw was a post by author Goldwag, who was not employed by the SPLC. He doesn't have a title there. He was hired more on an independent contract basis to look at things from an editorial perspective. So this is not an official decree. It's an editorial allegation.
Okay.
So the A Voice for Men has not been declared a hate group by the SPLC. It just was not.
Okay, well, that clarification I feel is very necessary. Definitely.
It is.
Can straighten things out.
It is. Now I saw that email where somebody had made that SPLC allegation, and it's one of those things that, since gender is a very emotional topic for many people, and since men's issues is a taboo, talking about men's issues is taboo, people who look at A Voice for Men and who are intimidated by it are going to go to their local imright.com and then find out some way to just throw whatever mud they can at it. And now I can understand the frustration because A Voice for Men is very different, very new, and very in your face. It's a site that uses something called juvenalian satire. And you know what that is?
I can guess from the title, but if you'd like to give
Juvenalian, well, it's not derived from juvenile. No, it refers to an ancient satirist, Juvenal. I don't know, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. But Juvenalian satire is the same kind of satire you'll find in 1984, A Clockwork Orange, Brave New World, a very successful form of satire that uses savage sarcasm and as a way to show that there's a kind of double standard or political wrong. This is contrast this with Hortian. I'm probably mispronouncing these. Hortian or Hortadian, I don't know. This other kind of satire, which is more lighthearted, poking, teasing humor. Now, Juvenalian satire is very provocative satire. It gets you thinking, but if you're the kind of person who is easily offended by dirty humor or something like that, the Juvenalian satire would often offend you. It's one of those things where if you take a risk by using Juvenalian satire, there's no doubt about it, you'll get people talking. And one of the reasons that the SPLC probably looked at Arthur Goldwag and talked about this manosphere thing was because they probably saw a lot of things going on in the manosphere. That was an entire collection of blogs. But I do not know if they ever mentioned A Voice for Men in particular.
Yeah.
Now, I will also say this. Paul Elam, the founder and publisher of A Voice for Men, who I very much vouch for, he's a very awesome guy. He did this. He did some pieces that were often in response to a feminist publication called Jezebel. And now Jezebel often writes things that are very sexist towards men. I'm just going to go out and say they're sexist towards men. They're very hateful and just awful publications. And what Paul would normally do is he would take their logic and he would pretty much cut and paste it almost, not verbatim. He wouldn't plagiarize anything, but he would use their same logic and then flip the sexes. He would say, well, let me repeat what you're saying, but make women the subject of your claims. Let's see how people respond. And that's exactly what he did with one article called "If You See Jezebel on the Road, Run the Bitch Down."
I saw it. Yes.
That was actually he did that in response to a Jezebel article that talked about openly beating boyfriends and husbands. He took the same thing they said, flipped the sexes, and what happened was exactly what he expected to happen. People got mad at him, but never once questioned the Jezebel article. So what ends up happening is people start saying, "Hey, A Voice for Men's a hate site," but Paul never actually meant any of the things that he would say in these satirical articles. He would just simply repeat what was said. In fact, there was wonderful quote from Stefan Molyneux, who spoke at the International Conference on Men's Issues up in St. Clair Shores. He said something, again, I'm paraphrasing here. He said something along the lines of, if you hear something idiotic, sometimes all you have to do is just repeat it back. And that's what Paul did. He saw an article where Jezebel was talking about beating husbands, so he said, okay, I'll write an article about beating women. Let's see what happens. Like, if that's going to be appropriate, then you have to understand that let's look at your logic and apply it to women. If we see that people get upset about the one about women, then we see a clear double standard here. I never meant anything I said in that, and when it comes to beating women. He would never do that. Mm-hmm. He's happily married. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things where people wouldn't see the satire. They would instead assume he meant everything he said and use that to color the entire organization and both the men and women who work under it. So what you're seeing, these concerns, is most are certainly indicative of a controversy. No doubt about it.
Well, and that's what I was going to bring up next, is that I believe that the issue people are having is that it's such a hot topic, it's such a hot button issue, but it's so controversial, the things. I've read a lot of his articles, I read a lot of other articles that were on the site, mainly from that original email, the original letter that was sent that raised concerns about the group. The one I responded to? I didn't see your response.
Okay, I did a public response to one of the emails I got. Mm-hmm. But what were you talking about? What email?
Well, what I had, it was an email that was sent to, I think, the Dean of Student Success or someone in that department, and that's all I got. I was sent that original email that was sent that had
I do know
concerns.
I think I know what email you're talking about. That one was sent, I believe, to Ed, and Ed sent it to me, and then I ended up addressing the grievance from whoever sent that email, and the person was never named, and Kathy Alday, and Ed saw it, and I think it's been addressed. I mean, there's no the SPLC allegation just holds no water. Mm-hmm. It's just, I know that makes some people upset because they would like to see A Voice for Men go down, but it's just not going to work.
And but I really do believe that the problem is that it's such. Like I said, so many of the articles that I read on A Voice for Men that are just on there are so controversial ideas that it makes people uncomfortable. There is one that Paul, how's his name pronounced?
Elam,
okay.
Paul
there is
Elam.
one that he wrote that he talks about women and the way that they dress and how that can provoke rape.
Yeah, I think he did another piece where he was saying that if women were dressing in a sexually provocative way, are they asking to be raped? And he said something along the lines of, yes.
They're damn well demanding it.
Yeah,
yes.
Damn well demanding it. And again, it's one of those things where you have to remember that Paul has a sense of humor, and because it's a very taboo topic that he's talking about, people often miss that. Now, when it comes to things that Paul is saying, I would say there's got to be a point where I can't really speak for him.
Mm-hmm.
You're fully just able to go to the staff masthead, pull his email out, and ask him yourself, right? But if I could sit here and keep defending Paul, but I think this is one of those things where it would probably be best if you ask him, because he can give you the original context and his entire line of thinking behind it. But all I can tell you is I can vouch for him, and that he's not the kind of guy who would openly advocate for the harm of anybody. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, since he has a very provocative sense of humor, like with many other comedians, right? Many comedians who have a provocative sense of humor use images of violence or something like that.
There are comedians who make jokes about rape and jokes
Right.
about things like
Exactly.
that. I think a lot of it is
Dave
the
Chappelle.
setting as well.
Is it Dave Chappelle? He's
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, because A Voice for Men does have a real concern about the gender zeitgeist, and it does advocate change. And when you mix that with satire, people often get confused about what is really meant and what isn't.
Yeah,
right?
and it's confusing, and I think it does. I think it just makes people incredibly uncomfortable.
Well,
and
I will go ahead and tell you this. There's a reason it's this way. we have been living in a culture, and we still are living in a culture, where the issues affecting men and boys not only is taboo, but men are often in a position where they're expected to give of themselves and to let women and let anybody who may be of a gender identity between men and women share their perspectives and have their issues addressed first, while men put their issues to the side and wait it out. And if men try to speak up about their issues, they're often silenced or told that their issues are incidental. Like, for example, if men were to complain about the male victims of rape, a response that they might hear is, oh, well, that's something men do to other men. That's called incidentalizing, making it sound like something that's not a cultural problem. It's just something that it's just cost of doing business as a civilization. It's a very insensitive attitude. But what Paul knew, what A Voice for Men knew, and what I know, is that if you want men's issues out there, if you want to break any taboo, you have to flat out reject that taboo. You have to just say exactly what you mean and not care what people think. You have to be ready to not care about how you sound and just say exactly what needs to be said in order to start that dialogue. And that may mean using very provocative satire. That may mean getting in people's faces and saying exactly what needs to be said. And on A Voice for Men, you're going to find articles of all sorts of people, and you'll find people who you find people who are historians, instructors, and artists, and all sorts of other minds that have come together and are contributing to this platform. One of its strengths, A Voice for Men's strengths, is that it's a very easy to contribute to resource. And the editorial process makes it so that all these people who have their own unique ideas can eventually get in touch, and they'll rise and have their articles published. It's a wonderful place. And since it's been opening up so many avenues for dialogue, and we've been getting more and more mainstream exposure, KSU Men included, well, eventually these issues are going to become mainstream. Now, I did an interview with Paul Elam, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. And Paul himself said that when men's issues become mainstream, a lot of the provocative rhetoric, we won't have as much of a need for it. Because we won't need to say, hey, this is what's going on, because there's nothing to really interrupt anymore. There's nothing to really, there's no real expectations to subvert, and there's no real reason to ignite a dialogue. Because at that point, people are already talking. So, and you can check out that interview on your own. I write under the alias Victor Zen, so you're going to have to search under that. Now, so I'm just going to go ahead and close on this A Voice for Men stuff by saying again, if you want Paul's full perspective on this, talk to him. I can't speak for him. And I also cannot speak for A Voice for Men unless I've been approved to do so, right? So it's it's one of those deals where you have to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? Now, A Voice for Men is very much a organization that knows exactly what to do to not be ignored, and it knows what it has to do in order to get people talking. And it's been doing, I think it's been doing society many, many favors by getting that conversation started, even if it means saying things that piss people off.
Okay. Trying to think if that covers the bases on most things. You yourself, are you a student here? You're
Yes.
a student here? Okay, what year are you?
Senior.
And what is your major?
Computer science.
Okay.
Think about changing that.
Really?
I mean, computer science is, first of all, everybody that looks like me is going into computer science. And second, it's the economic viability of that degree seems to be going down in my eyes. I'm thinking, I love computers, I really do. They're magical machines, but maybe some more information systems or something business.
Okay. But right now it's computer science. Okay, and then I think we've covered most everything on that. What is it you say that you do for A Voice for Men?
I'm the Collegiate Activism Director. My job is to act as a liaison to faculty and students in any university, anywhere, who, well, of course I'm limited to English because I speak English, but when I act as a liaison, they contact me, if they want to figure out how to put an institutional presence for men's rights advocacy on their local campuses, I offer whatever advising or help that I can within my capacity. And if A Voice for Men is interested in pursuing a project at that university, which is something that is left to senior management, then that may extend to that point. But of course, that's not up to me.
And when was KSU Men's created?
November 6th.
And that was last year, correct? Right. And how long have you been with The Voice for Men?
Since December of 2012.
Okay. Thinking that covers pretty much everything I have.
You have anything more specific as to future plans or anything like that?
I mean, I know you guys, don't you have a conference coming up?
Yes, we do.
Can you talk about the conference a little bit?
November 1st, 3 o'clock. We have speakers coming down to the university rooms, and we'll be, the speakers being Jonathan Taylor, Paul Elam, Karen Strawn, and Janice Fiamengo. We had Miles Groth, but due to the way our fundraiser's been going, we're probably not going to afford him anymore, which is unfortunate because I didn't want to have to cut anybody. But we, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss educational equity in particular. We're going to discuss the Dear Colleague letter. We're going to discuss the harsh climate that faces men and boys in academic environments. In particularly, this would be more in gender studies programs and in things like RAD systems. I'm going to be bringing up RAD systems. I'm not a speaker, but I will MC the event. Mm-hmm. And what I want to see happen on KSU is, again, a dialogue opening. And we ultimately, on November 11th, we're going to host our first officer election. That's when the KSUM Constitution states every officer has 1-year terms. So my term ends, and somebody will be replacing me, and other officers will be coming in and offering their time. And this conference will help educate the community and generate the interest necessary for this election, which is what makes this conference important. And we have, I believe, 11 members right now, and over 40 prospective members. What I do is I just email them and just slowly but surely get each of them on the official roster. So yeah, this conference is going to be amazing, I think. And it's we've been hosting a Fund Anything campaign for the past 30 days. It'll be over in, I believe, 42 hours now, and we're a pretty good ways toward our goal. We didn't quite hit it, but we still have enough to do something.
Okay, then I'll set a reminder. I'll probably want to cover that. You said it was November 1st, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have those 3 missions concerning the gender studies and, the RAD for Men and all of that. Do you have any other missions coming up or any other plans or ideas, anything like that?
If I add anything else to my plate, my head will explode.
Probably.
As is obvious, you don't become a men's rights activist because you want to be liked, right? And this is something that it's very fulfilling work, very purposeful work, mm-hmm. and it's been a real amazing journey, and I've had many wonderful people helping us out along the way. And I was working at this alone for several months, but now we've gotten officers and we've gotten members, and it's I have signatures that show that the KSU students actually want this here. Mm-hmm. But we are going to see backlash. There's no doubt about it. We're going to see, and I think it's going to grow. I do think the backlash is going to grow. And we, of course, we are a very peaceful bunch. We don't mean any harm to anybody, and we're very much for gender equity and the agency of every one human being. We do not in any way, I'm speaking both for KSUM and A Voice for Men here. We do not in any way advocate for a gender-centric view of the world. We do not in any way advocate for telling people what to do with their lives. But since we're dealing in a very intense gender zeitgeist where this is a very taboo subject, people get the impression that we are. Mm-hmm. And that's just, I can't control what people think. All we can do is just try to be louder than them and saying the very honest truth, very blunt truth about the relationships between men and women as demographics.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can think of before we go.
I do want to go ahead and invite you to contact me at any time. I mean, there's nothing, I'm not going anywhere for a while. And I would say that however, the longer you wait, the harder it'll be to get in touch with me, because mm-hmm. this conference is quickly going to become my life.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
And conferences are not easy to set up.
I can imagine.
And getting everybody here, making sure that plane flights and car rides are organized, and parking is also, it's taxes. This is, I hope that this puts some of the concerns at ease.
And that's the idea here, is to kind of
Well,
put that down.
I would like to ask, I understand that this is not the best form in journalism, but would you mind letting me know about what is going on with the draft of whatever piece you're going to do, so that I can be sure that everybody is quoted respectfully and is representative of their views?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it has to be in, I think, Friday evening. I will probably...
Oh, you gotta crank that out.
Oh yeah, it's easy. I will probably have it done by Wednesday night or Thursday, and I can definitely let you know, and you can make sure everything's credited. I mean,
Sure.
I prefer that, and you can let me know if I got anything incorrect, if you feel like it was misrepresented, because I don't want to put something out that gets across the wrong message, because the idea
Right.
here is to
Well, I will
straighten
go ahead and say that there is never going to be a time, at least not soon, where you can write anything about either K-Sum or A Voice for Men, where somebody won't think, well, they're still a hate group.
Yeah,
That's going to
which
happen.
I understand.
That's going to happen.
But the idea is mainly, I got that, and there are some who are like, man, we want to write a story about them being a hate group. That's not what I want to do.
Good. Thank
I want
you.
to straighten it out and figure out what it is really, and let people know. And because if it is a good thing, people need to know it's a good thing.
Right, and I appreciate you saying that, because when I know that you've heard of the Elliot Rodgers shooting over in Cali.
I have not, actually.
You have not?
I have not.
Okay. Well, this is the kind of brouhaha we often experience. So Elliot Rodgers, a guy that ended up going out and killing both women and men, more men than he did women, but he expressed openly in a manifesto that he both hated men and women as well. But people took the fact that he said he was a virgin and he never kissed a girl, and said that he resented not having a girlfriend, to say that his massacre, his shooting, was inspired purely by misogyny, when it was misanthropy. He hated humanity. He was very disturbed. But what ended up happening was that somebody, I believe at Kent State, somebody at the Kent State paper wrote, this was speculation, that he was influenced by the men's rights movement. So the internet flew into a frenzy.
I understand.
And because this was, you know how confirmation bias is on the internet. And a whole bunch of people who thought, see, and I read the guy's 107 pages of whining, and nothing in that manifesto said that he was a men's rights activist. He was very a self-centered individual, and nothing, of course, on the face of it, a murderer can't be a human rights activist. Come on, it's. The only thing that they could tie him to was that he was a member of either pickup artist communities or pickup artist critical communities, and the details are lost to me at the moment. But the pickup artist community is considered to be under, again, the manosphere, and then people just jump to men's rights activism and see, A Voice for Men's a hate group, told you. And of course, we all have to roll our eyes and keep going anyway, because again, we don't do this because we want to be liked, we do this because we want to solve problems, but people don't like the fact that we're out to solve problems, or people don't like what we say sometimes, and people look at that and try to find any possible reason to throw mud. And that's just the reality of the situation.
I'm trying to understand. I think that happens with any activist group, honestly. If you're trying to make change, you're going to have, people to go against. So, but I do want you to know that that is not the purpose of me being here, is to, try to stir up trouble. It's to try to get to the bottom of it and figure out what's really going on.
I'm very much in support of a campus that is for gender equity. Now, whenever I work in issues of this nature, I've never once believed that a single organization could save the world, right? And I'm sorry if I'm boring you.
No,
I'm listening, but I'm just cleaning up my email while I'll listen.
Okay. I never believed that there was one organization that could go out and make equality for everybody. First of all, that sounds expensive.
It does.
I mean, if you think about just the money, think about the timeline, and you think about the organizational problems. Who do we help first? Do we have to help them repeatedly? I found it's much more realistic to let people specialize in whatever demographic or set of problems that they think they can handle. And KSU Men does not claim to help all men, because it can't. We advocate for solutions to issues affecting male students, particularly in the KSU communities. That makes things workable.
It does.
So and of course we are all completely open to collaborating with, say, Kennesaw Pride Alliance, Kennesaw Women in Mathematics, Women in Technology, because we can build a gender equitable campus by having all these specialized groups overall building a gender equitable campus. It's not something you can make into a centralized ivory tower utopian behemoth and stop. It doesn't happen that way. So KSU Men is the first organization of its kind in Georgia, and it's not going to be the last, and it's certainly going to not be the last either in the state or in the nation or even internationally. It's just more and more of these organizations are going to pop up because more and more people are noticing something is wrong. A lot of it's in academia, and I'm very optimistic about the future, but it's not going to be a smooth ride.
Which, I don't think it ever is, but that typically means that you're doing something good, so.
Typically.
I think that covers anything, unless you had anything else. I think we got pretty much everything, your plans, clarification on everything.
I thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and I thank you for approaching this with a very objective eye, as opposed to making a decision about what you're going to write and then sticking with it. Because I've been accustomed to that. No, but again, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. And if you have any other clarifying questions, I am available. You have my email.
Definitely. I'm going to try to get a hold of Paul Elam, and I was trying to get a hold of Shamika Wilson and some other people, but I haven't gotten answers from anyone yet. So.
1 second.
Why is there not a good email
452.
app that actually cleans up your email?
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
Good. What's up, man?
Do you have a minute?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here with Sierra from the Sentinel on KSU. Would you be willing to talk with her for just a moment, so if she has any clarifying questions?
Sure.
All right. Here, let me put her on. Here he is, keen misogynist himself.
Hello?
Hello. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
Okay, so the main thing, I've been talking with Sage here for about an hour now, and I've learned a lot about KSU Men, and a little bit about A Voice for Men. We're trying to address some of the concerns that people have with KSU Men, but branching out to A Voice for Men. There are, concerns about articles on the sites, and Sage talked about a little bit of the satirical nature of a lot of the articles and everything. But a lot of people, I guess, have concerns about some things on the site about addressing false rape allegations and things like that. And there are concerns about an article that talks about, kind of breaks down the logic of, if someone's found not guilty, it means that they're innocent, which means the majority of rape allegations are false and things like that. So I was hoping to get kind of a clarification on where A Voice for Men stands on those kind of issues.
Sure. Be happy to help with that.
Okay, so
But I need to take this one question at a time.
Okay. So as far as breaking down the logic into, a majority of rape allegations are false and things like that, is that a belief held by the group, by an individual? And I wanted to get some clarification on that in particular.
No. The editorial position of A Voice for Men is that I believe the factual one, which is that nobody knows the percentage of allegations that are false. It's not something that's easily ascertainable. There are estimates that range anywhere from 2% to 45%, and I saw one in one case that said 60%. However, I don't consider any one of those particular sources, whether it is the DOJ statistics or the statistics provided by Eugene Kanan, which point to a 45% number, or the McDonald study, which pointed more towards 60%. that's a lot of people falsely accused. If it's more than that, then that's the more many people that are accused. But whatever the rate, it's certainly a problem for the numbers of men that are accused of writing falsely.
Okay, so you do address this on the site. Do you have some kind of proposed solution to this, or is this just an issue that you guys are expressing?
Well, I think there's a number of possible ways to address the issue. I'd stop short of a word solution any more than I think that there's a solution to rape other than imprisoning everybody from birth. I mean, people are going to do wrong things. But I do think that educating young men about scenarios that can result in a false accusation is helpful. I think that prosecutors and police being mandated to arrest and prosecute false accusers, which they currently tend not to do, is a possible part of addressing the problem. And I think that educating people about the consequences of false accusations on the lives of people that are wrongly accused can also help be part of addressing the problem.
Okay, another question I had, I noticed, I think it was on your mission statement page, it talks about that a Voice for Men denounces the institution of marriage. I just wanted to know if you could give me some more details on why that is.
Sure. We denounce it as it is currently practiced and is currently affected by our family law system. You'll also note on that mission statement is that we recognize that marriage has historically been a part of the what we would call the fabric of our society and a very important part of it. But that family courts have been corrupted to the point through the use of Title IV defunding, through the bias against fathers in courtrooms, the bias in custody disputes, the issuance of restraining orders without evidence or corroboration in order to get a leg up in a divorce, makes it a very hostile environment. This has affected some women too, but more disproportionately so men. So the institution itself has become sort of a killing field for families. The children are ultimately affected by this. Children that are alienated from their fathers through use of the family courts have the greatest level of tendency toward what we would call a negative impact in psychosocial factors like truancy, teen pregnancy, drug use, criminality, you name it. Those, if you look at groups that commit those problems, that have those problems, the common thread in most of them is from being from fatherless homes. That doesn't happen in many cases without the involvement and the intervention of family courts.
Okay, and then the one last clarification I wanted was another thing that was on your mission statement about putting an end to chivalry. And that was another thing that I was hoping to get more details on.
It is precisely what it says on the surface, with social rules in play that favor women. And when we define chivalry, we're talking about special treatment, special accommodation, special deference to women delivered by men. That sort of social mentality is not consistent with the idea of equality.
Okay, so that got clarification on most of the questions I had, some issues that were raised that people had some concerns about. And like I said, Sage has explained a lot about the satirical nature and things like that, so I think that that's mainly the questions that I had for you.
Okay.
And Paul, I have asked Sierra, and she will let me know about her piece, so that make sure that everybody's ideas are represented fairly, and I'll make sure you get a CC of it as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul. Sorry if I disturbed you.
Thank you.
That's all right. No problem.
You have a good night, Paul.
Have a great day.
You too. Well, did he in any way try to oppress you or make him a sandwich?
No, I appreciate that. That actually did answer a lot of questions I had.
Yeah, and I can actually give you just a couple more elaborate details before I go. The chivalry thing, I very much am anti-chivalry myself. I'm not anti-good manners, right? I'm not anti-treating people fairly and justly. But what I am anti, chivalry was is an ancient code, kind of like Bushido, but a more medieval one, right? That tells men to focus on women as an object of which to provide service, and that alone shows that it's in many ways dangerous toward men as a human being with liberties. So it's one of those things where chivalry. There's actually excellent articles on the Voice for Men that were published recently. I think it was by Peter Wright. Just look for them. They're fairly recent. Just keep looking for. It's a 2-parter article that cites manuals on chivalry, and if you read them, just switch the sexes. Pretend like they were rules for women, and you would see that. Oh, yeah, these are messed up. And marriage, again, that Paul's looking at it from a very systemic judicial context, not an emotional connotative context, right? Okay. So if I've been to rallies where fathers have been completely destroyed because of an allegation, again, an allegation unsubstantiated by the wife that ended up costing this man his children and his home. And marriage is a kind of an arrangement that makes it very easy for that kind of violation of due process to occur. So the opposition of marriage is an opposition to whatever feeds this corrupt court system. That's what's ultimately behind that.
Okay. All right. Well, you do have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because I am. Plus, you have to head out because